Good afternoon, everyone. And greetings, President Elsner, trustees, esteemed faculty, graduates, parents, friends, and family. It's a particularly special blessing for me to receive this honor from a Franciscan university just a week after the world laid to rest the remarkable Pope Francis. We often hear of men of large stature described as gentle giants. And Francis was such a giant, though he stood only 5'8" tall. And though he chose his papal name in honor of Saint Francis of Assisi, I'm confident he would have readily agreed with another Francis, Saint Francis de Sales, who wrote that nothing is so strong as gentleness, and nothing is so gentle as real strength. It's a perspective I wish more people would take to heart. In a moment when so many seem to view gentleness and strength as competing and mutually exclusive values. In his life and in his death, Pope Francis modeled for us a strength of purpose and character defined by a powerful gentleness. And perhaps in his memory, those of us here today can challenge ourselves and each other to follow his generous example. So in any case, you all have arrived. Not quite at the moment you've been waiting for, but at the moment before the moment you've been waiting for. And I have 3 challenges I want to make in this 2-hour speech that I'm about to give. First, one bit of context in my own frame of reference. There are some Christians who think a life in politics is incompatible with a life of faith. And no matter what they profess when the cameras are on, there are politicians who think faith is superfluous to a life in elected office. And I see it quite differently. Christians of all denominations often refer to the church as the body of Christ. And in government, we talk about the body politic. And what I know to be true of all bodies is that they need continuous care, sustenance, stimulation, support. And without those things, all bodies, regardless of origin or species, fail to thrive. So my job is to care for the body politic in precisely the same way that all of us in this room are tasked with caring for the body of Christ, because to me, they are one and the same. And in fact, I believe each of us has a duty of care, sacred and civil, to build and sustain societal systems that honor the dignity of all persons, that create both peace and justice, that heal the brokenness in our communities through reconciliation, and that responsibly steward our shared resources, be they human, economic, or natural. And since those principles align perfectly with the values espoused here at Marion University, I'm very much looking forward to the contributions that each one of you graduates will make to the construction of those systems. So this brings me to the first of my points. Like politics and faith, the concepts of societal systems and the dignity of the individual strike many people as incompatible. How and when do we begin to build systems that advance the dignity of the individual? And the answer, I believe, is that we must start with empathy. Because practicing it opens our minds and our hearts to the humanity we share with another person, no matter how different their appearance or lived experience is from our own. And it allows us to see that the diminishing of the dignity of one person diminishes the dignity of us all. And empathy guides us to the creation of societal systems which reflect that reality. So let me put it more concretely. Imagine that you're walking along the banks of the White River and you happen to notice the upturned belly of a single dead fish. Your first thought might be, I wonder what was wrong with that fish. Now imagine you're walking along the banks of the White River and you see the upturned bellies of 1,000 dead fish. In this instance, your first thought is more likely to be, what on earth is wrong with that water? Practicing empathy is how we move from seeing our society's challenges not as fish problems, but as water problems. Because empathy reminds us that we are all fish, and when something's wrong with the water, we all have a problem, and we are all responsible for solving it. Now, luckily for the rest of us, the Franciscan traditions here at Marion University have left each of you uniquely prepared for solving these problems. If we view honoring and advancing the dignity of individuals as sacred and civil, or as a sacred and civil imperative, when that's our starting point, we will do a better job caring for those who Jesus called the least of these. And that, in turn, will help us do a better job of caring for all of these. And it will enable us to build communities that are rich in peace and justice and arts and culture, with abundant mental, physical, spiritual, and environmental health. And that is communities where everyone is welcome to live and to work and to play and to pray and to learn and to create and to connect and to just be. So my first challenge to you, graduates, no matter your field of expertise or course of study, is to begin with empathy. My second challenge to each of you is equally important, but may sound less inspirational. And that is, and I want to thank our speaker this morning at Mass, Ms. Colleen Klein. My second challenge to you this morning, or this afternoon, is that I want you to get out there and fail. Now, with all due respect to our esteemed Marion University faculty, and parents, do not gasp, failure may be the most effective teacher most of us are likely ever to encounter. And if this strikes anyone as hyperbole, I challenge you at some point today to find someone who's ever lost a spelling bee. Find someone who was first runner-up in a 5th grade homeroom spelling bee. And I will bet you a student loan payment that person will not only tell you the word they went out on, they'll spell it for you, no matter how many years it's been. Because researchers have discovered that we are better at transferring and applying the knowledge that we gain through failure than we are the knowledge that we gain through success. And why is that? Because we tend to analyze our failures in much greater detail than our successes. So when you ace an exam, do you go back through your notes to see how you did it? No. But if you fail an exam, and for all of these scholars in this room, I know that means getting anything like a B, we immediately begin to ask ourselves why, where, and how did I go wrong? And what we learn through the process of analyzing that failure becomes the foundation upon which future successes are built. So once again, this is not hyperbole or rah-rah psychology. In 2019, now your eyes may glaze over a little bit here, but just bear with me. In 2019, a group of researchers from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management published a study demonstrating the principle that early failure can actually breed later success. The team analyzed more than 750,000 research grant applications that were submitted to the National Institute of Health between 1990 and 2005. And those that were focused on a common grant type, which is important to biomedical researchers early in their careers. The average value of those grants was $1.3 million. And receiving one could put you on track as a young scientist directly onto the tenure track. So now, the researchers assume that the grant funding, along, of course, with the professional connections and job security that tend to accompany it, would be predictive of success later in a young scientist's career. And instead, they found that young scientists whose grant application scored just below the approved threshold in a given year were more likely to publish highly successful papers in the 5 years after their grant was denied. Now, the key difference that they discovered was that young scientists who narrowly missed out on grant funding learned from their first failed attempts. Let me say this again. They learned from their first failed attempts and then applied that learning to their future attempts. And that they found that the more quickly young scientists moved through the process of attempting, failing, learning, applying that learning, and then reattempting, the more quickly they achieved success. All of which I think can be boiled down to give yourself permission to fail early, and to fail often. How often? The Kellogg researchers determined that there is, in fact, a minimum number of failures that we need to learn. And for the young scientists applying for the NIH grants, the minimum number of failures needed to learn averaged to around 3. Now, while the researchers' minimum number of failures concept holds steady across different disciplines, the actual number, however, doesn't. Now, let me ask you something. Does anyone know why the rust protection solvent WD-40 is called WD-40? It is because WD-39 didn't quite perform to its inventor's expectations. So for all the parents who are sitting out there wondering, is this man encouraging my child to get out there and fail 39 times? I am not. Now think about James Dyson. James Dyson tested 5,127 prototypes of his bagless vacuum cleaner before getting one to work. Now, Dyson was not an engineer, he was an art student. Now, if he'd been an engineer, maybe that number would have gone down. We can't know for sure. So parents, take heart, because as of last month, Forbes magazine lists James Dyson as the world's 149th richest person with a net worth of roughly $15 billion, which may provide a little encouragement for parents of art majors. Now, the point, graduates, is that we don't know whether your minimum number of failures required to learn will be 3, or 39, or 5,120 something. What we do know is the data indicates that you need to go ahead, and get started. Which brings me to my third challenge. Once you've started, do not take no for an answer. Because if you're willing to take no for an answer, you are likely to hear it a lot. My parents were both formidable people in very different ways, but one thing they shared was a profound and selective deafness to the word no. As a high school student in Nigeria, my father discovered a book about soul science, written by a Purdue University professor. And though it doesn't sound particularly inspiring to me, that book on soul science inspired my father to become a civil engineer. And he made up his mind that somehow, some way, he was going to get to America, graduate from Purdue University, and then one day return to Nigeria to aid in its development when it gained independence. But my father's father passed away before my father graduated from high school, leaving my father without the means to travel overseas, much less to pay for a college education when he got there. And nevertheless, as they say, he persisted. He graduated at the top of his class and negotiated with one of his uncles to pay for him to come to America. My father came to America on a cargo boat, not a cruise ship, not an ocean liner, not an airplane, one of those big, slow, steamy cargo boats. But he made it here. And he had exemplary grades, got him to a college in Iowa, and his hard work there earned him a transfer to Purdue, where he collected a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a wife, who happened to be my mother. At every step of this journey, whenever someone or something seemed to be saying no, my father found a way to make it a yes. Now, my mother grew up here in Indianapolis, the daughter of a woman who was also selectively, deaf to the word no. My grandmother was determined that all of her children would go to college and grad school. And this is at a time in the 1940s when that was a significantly steeper challenge than it is now. And before attending Purdue University for graduate school, where my mom met my father, My mother applied and was admitted to a well-known university to study organic chemistry, a university whose policy at the time limited enrollment of Black students to 10 individuals a year. Now, those are long odds, even for a young woman who was on the National Honor Roll. So my mother, who had inherited her mother's do it and dare them to stop me approach to life, decided to enroll in summer classes at this university, figuring correctly that when fall rolled around and classes began in earnest, she would already be considered enrolled. The degree she earned from that university was one of 3 that would eventually hang on her walls. And I'm not sure which one she would have been proudest of, though I know for sure which one has made me feel the most proud of her. Now, there's much about your futures that we can't know, graduates. But there are a couple of things that we can. You will experience failure. You will be told no. But your willingness to learn from your failures will help you craft the tools that you need to turn your no into yes. Pope Francis once said that educating is an act of love. And if years from now you recall nothing else from today, I hope that you remember that description of education and know that it applies to you. That you feel the love that has gone into educating you, that you recognize in their daily arrival on campus the act of love inherent in the work of every member of the Marion University faculty, its staff, and its administrators, and of course, the ocean of love pouring from the section where your loved ones are seated today. I hope, too, that one day you reflect on having attained a Marion University education as an act of love for yourself and for the communities near and far who stand ready to welcome you into their midst. So, if you'll permit me, I'd like to close with a blessing written by the Reverend William Sloan Coffin, Jr. Full disclosure, Reverend Coffin was a Presbyterian, not a Catholic, but I'm going to offer it nonetheless. Graduates, as you go from here today, may God give you the grace never to sell yourself short, grace to risk something big for something good, and grace to remember the world is now too dangerous for anything but truth and too small for anything but love. Go in peace. Thank you.